and you don't want them there?
Well, I mean, they're pretty in the fall, but they're not native. And if we just keep them, let them spread. It's like here. The myrtle extends for acres. Just keeps going. That's another ground cover.
I mean,
and then the wisteria. You see the wisteria climbing up everything. There's a lot of wisteria you cleared at Veblen House. So this is covering acres here.
Yeah. And
it's gotten all the way out to the right of way out there where the gas line is. So you see this Japanese maple is huge. That was the original one.
Oh,
and then
that's
you
the
see a
tree.
zillion seedlings down here. It doesn't spread too much, but I mean over time it will.
No, the problem with something like that is it might look nice, but ecologically it doesn't do stuff for wildlife.
Right, they tend not to eat it, and so it has a competitive advantage over the natives, which the wildlife do like to eat. So eventually, the exotics take over, and there isn't anything left to eat.
It's kind of the forest becomes kind of a deceptive desert.
Yeah. So you have wisteria here, and then underneath that you have all these Japanese maples popping up, and then you can see the wisteria climbing up this tree.
Now the thing is, to control this, I mean, we can go in and prune sections of it, but we're looking at Herrontown, and this is 212 acres.
Yeah.
And some sections are pretty good, but if you want to control for all this stuff,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I've got,
right.
I already got a day job.
Yeah.
And it gives me all the more respect. And when you come out here and do this labor, you're just trying to make the land conform to what you want it to be. Can you imagine if this was your job in the 1870s? You come out here and tame this thing?
Yeah. Oh, what's that growing up over? That might be wild cucumber. You see that, whatever that is with the big leaf?
You pointed out.
Well, there's a bunch of wisteria, and I want to check it out. This is almost like a botanical, archaeological site to figure out where some of these things may have started. And you see that big leaf there. I guess that's a wild grape. Yeah, this is all wild grape.
Cucumber.
I wonder how the grapes are coming along this year. Some of these grapes are the big ones that are really tasty. Uppernongs. That's wisteria.
Okay. Wisteria is a nice sounding name for a vine.
Yeah, there's actually a native wisteria, but you almost never see it. I've never seen it growing in the wild.
The vines are the equivalent of parasitic plants in that they grow up around the tree,
right.
choke off the sunlight, and then eventually kill it.
Well, they don't have to put energy into creating a structure for themselves.
Yeah, they're piggybacking.
They're right, piggybacking on the trees, so they can put all their energy into growing, extending, 10, 20 feet per year.
And there are trees that they choke off and kill, right? Or
yeah.
Is that common?
Well, they'll grow up and over the tree, so they'll start shading the tree while at the same time they're adding weight to the tree. And then if you have an ice storm come along,
yeah.
So then you have all that extra surface area for the ice to glom onto, and then you have this tremendous amount of weight on the tree, and the tree is already weakened from not having gotten much sunlight because the vine was shading it, and so at that point the tree will topple over.
Is it a natural state for forests to have so many trees down, or is that just because in New Jersey, with certain forest conditions and with recent, weather, that we see so many trees down? Mm-hmm. And one of the things with the trees is, you get these pits of, oftentimes the water goes in there, and it's a good place for frogs to live.
Yeah, you have more micro habitats.
It creates environments.
Good. Yeah, so actually the farmers flattened everything out So now this is second growth forest, and when these trees fall down, then they're starting to recreate what was here before the farmers came.
So a more natural forest is bumpier on the ground. It's not as even.
Oh yeah. America was very bumpy when because there would be huge trees. The Indians would use fire a lot, so they killed the smaller trees, and you get these immense trees like chestnuts that could be 15 feet across.
The Lenape, those were the Indians. They would clear for agriculture?
Yeah, some, but they were not taking down huge trees.
Right. They weren't intensive with it.
Yeah. So they'd probably go favor the floodplains, richer soil.
One of the things that, 100 years later, we don't realize that, how much of the old growth forest was cut down in the 19th century. And then when they got, like when coal came in, that they used to leave some part of the farm for trees for firewood.
Yeah.
But then you got these other heating sources. You can cut the whole thing down.
Right.
So there was a ton of deforestation, and then this stuff grows up. But this was all cut down, and it looks like, oh, this forest has been here forever. No, it was cut down, and this is second growth.
Yeah, this was all fields. Not all that long ago. What, 60, 70 years ago? This would have been all fields, and you'd have nice views. That's for sure. Nice vistas. And then it grows up, but it's not really growing in a natural way. So I think of most of these forests as being not particularly healthy, kind of too dense, and just,
what would be a healthy way for a forest to grow up? I mean, some distinctions here.
Well, I would say I don't know if fire might have played a role in
Part
here.
of a natural cycle.
Yeah, you could have had natural fires, or the Indians used fire a lot to reduce the tick population, to improve the sight lines for hunting, to draw the game in, because after a fire you have all those nutrients in the ash, and then that would bring up this, the plant roots would still survive, so the roots would send up all this lush vegetation that had a lot of nutrition because of the sudden input of nutrients. So that would attract the game, all the wildlife, and then they could have pretty good hunting.
So because we live in modern suburbia and we fire suppress and we don't have these big forests,
right,
it changes the ecology.
And the fire would have made a more park-like appearance. The smaller trees with the thinner bark would not have been able to survive, so it'd be the bigger trees that would survive, and then they would become quite massive, and you'd have long vistas underneath. So underneath this very vaulted
the more
canopy.
natural forest you're talking about has larger trees.
Yeah.
And these are skinnier.
Yeah, and probably too dense, and so they're stunting each other, and so I mean it would eventually evolve perhaps to a more mature forest. But this is kind of a I don't know, second growth.
Yeah, and it's never going to get back to the way it was.
Not with wisteria growing all over the place.
Not with invasives, not with fire, and then the twin thing of invasives and fire
and too many deer. So there's no predators left to keep the deer population.
So a lot
in
of
balance.
the larger trees are still native, but they're not necessarily the kind that used to be.
No, I think this. We have
they're not as
different
big.
oaks and tulip poplar and ash and all that, but. Yeah, I mean, some of them are getting there. Some of them are getting pretty big. So, but the understory, the plow would have erased all the forbs, all the wildflowers that used to grow here. There's a golf ball.
Whoa!
I love urban botany here. That is a golf ball.
Or maybe it's an egg.
Yeah.
Union carbide.
Yeah, maybe that's evidence of.
How did this get
life.
out here? Somebody's just
a
whacking a golf
pretty
ball.
good shot.
I mean, this is far.
Yeah, we're pretty far from a golf course. But there's a house right over there in that clearing. So maybe they were just hitting balls in the woods.
Or maybe it fell from an airplane.
I don't know. What was I saying? Oh, yes. The soil would have been... The memory of the soil would have been lost. The plow would have erased all those wildflowers, and they can't just move quickly back in. They don't reproduce that way. So the ground doesn't have the diversity. Like over at Herringtown Woods, there are areas that were never plowed, and they still have a lot of diverse kinds of wildflowers growing there because those were never plowed under. So the rocks protected that area, but there aren't as many boulders here. So this area would have been, aggressively grazed or plowed or whatever. So you don't have the seed bank to bring back what had been a natural forest. Although the trees, you have the trees, but all the other things are pretty limited.
And given the scope of the land, it would be very hard to bring back that soil memory.
Yeah, that would take
you
a
have
long
to be
time.
planning.
So this stuff has moved into the void. All this
and if you're doing that planting, you got to get rid of that stuff too.
Yeah.
So what would have been wild flowers in the old days?
Yeah.
Which were beneficial for all sorts of critters and ecology.
Yeah.
Becomes this stuff, which is
just
relatively barren.
Yeah, I don't see anything eating this stuff at all. So it's not really performing a role in the ecosystem.
Were there, like, in the old days, like, I was surprised that bees were imported from Europe, or honeybees.
Yeah, the honeybees.
Yeah, they weren't just always here.
Right.
So what was were just other insects performing the function?
Well, there's hundreds of native bees.
Okay.
And they were pretty specialized for different kinds of shapes of flowers, and there's a blueberry bee. There's many different kinds of bees, and I have a lot of wildflowers planted in my backyard, and I get maybe 30, 40 different kinds of bee or wasp or all kinds of pollinators just coming, and honeybees are just one of many kinds.
And they happen to be the one that was good for human honey. So we cultivate them?
Right, they're the ones, the native ones tend to, to have their nests underground. They don't have as much honey. They aren't as useful for people. So some people speculate that the honeybees, that there was a native bee that played that role, but that the European honeybee displaced it. So we don't even know what that might have been.
Yeah.
And the other interesting theory is that the honeybee hastened the extinction of the Carolina parakeet. A Carolina parakeet was a kind of bird that was native, especially to the southeast, and it disappeared. The farmers would shoot it because it to some extent went after the fruit trees.
So it's the American dodo.
Yeah, there's passenger pigeon. There's the Carolina parakeet.
We never heard of the Carolina parakeet.
Right. Yeah, it's one of the. Yeah, and if you travel to South America, you'll see these similar green parakeets, and I always wonder if there's a parallel universe down there where something very similar to a Carolina
It's
parakeet.
odd to think of our gentle honeybee as a kind of invasive.
Yeah,
it kind of throws you.
What it did is the honeybee would take over the nesting sites that the parakeets had used in the trees. And the honeybees would defend those rather aggressively against. So the Carolina parakeets didn't have as many nesting sites. Plus, all the trees were being taken down at that time too. So there was all kinds of habitat loss and then competition.
So there's still lots of bees around that aren't our honeybees, but does the honeybee, which is more common because of human use, does it perform a lot of the same functions that those wild bees used to?
Yeah, it's I think it's more of a generalist. It's not a specialist, so I don't know if there's particular flowers that the honeybee doesn't go to that would need that native bee to.
Yeah, because with honey we have all kinds of different kinds of, there's clover honey.
Right.
It's sort of
Linden.
wherever the farm is that they get the plants around it.
Yeah. So it's and the honeybees, they're still around. They're just struggling more because of the mites that have been imported. Maybe the mites just caught up with them. The honeybees were introduced here, but none of their predators were, and now finally
the predators are coming in.
Yeah, the parasites or whatever are catching up with them.
Now, if we brought honeybees out here, would they be able to survive with the kind of flora out here, or there's not enough?
I don't know what they do in the summer because, if you just have trees, there's hardly any blooms. I mean, there's just a few of those bottle brush buckeyes over there.
I mean, so before there was farms here, they would have been able to survive out here.
Well, yeah, and the farms would have had, in the summer, a lot of the wildflowers that are in full sunlight will bloom. In the woods, the wildflowers can only get light in the spring before the trees leaf out.
Yeah.
That's when the sun is pouring down, so that's why you get all those spring ephemerals growing in the spring, the wildflowers that, like trilliums and so forth, that grow in the spring, make their flowers quickly, gather some sunlight, and then they die back by the middle of the summer.
Because the forest canopy hasn't...
Yeah, because the tree, you're right. Because
it hasn't stopped the sunlight from coming in yet.
Right, that's their opportunity in the spring.
Okay.
So later on the trees leaf out, and then the game's over for all these wildflowers. They go into dormancy for the rest of the year.
It's amazing when the fall and winter comes, how the vista changes out here. That you can just see so much further.
Yeah.
There might be a building over there that we wouldn't, it might be just beyond there.
Right.
And we wouldn't know it.
We can't see
the winter comes, there's a big building there. How did I miss that? Well, it's all covered over by this green.